Hello, little people. So next piece of the story, we have Barney back in the dump with Stig, and he's just asked Stig, has he been digging? And Stig grinned and nodded because he has. Okay, so let's see what happens next. Have you thought about it? Have you thought about what might happen next? The chapter's called Digging with Stig. Barney may join in. Who knows? Well, I wonder where they're digging to. Let's see. It was gloomy and overhung in Stig's end of the pit, even on this bright day, and the den itself, now that the hole in the roof was mended, was even darker. The teapot lamp was flickering and throwing a dim light on the den and the place where Stig had been digging, but it was not very cheerful. Come to think of it, thought Barney, rabbits and things that live in holes don't have any light at all. Not much fun for them with no windows. Couldn't he find some windows for Stig? What made it worse was that Stig had started a small fire in the den part. He must have just done it because Barney had not noticed any smoke when he was sitting on the tree trunk. The smoke was filling the den and there was no way out for it except to trickle through the gaps in the roof. It made Barney's eyes water. But he supposed it was one of the things you just had to put up with, like nettles. Do you remember they got stung? And Barney didn't like it, but Stig seemed to not notice. All the same, the place could do with a chimney as well as windows. He began to get used to the darkness, and he could see that the tunnel at the back of the cave went further back into the chalk wall than he had noticed. The digging tools were lying about. The bedstead leg, a broken cast iron shoe scraper, and an iron bar like the one he'd seen his father use on the jack to lift his car up. Stig was reaching up to offer Barney another turnip, but Barney didn't feel like turnip so soon after breakfast. "Can I help you dig, Stig?" he asked. "I expect you're busy anyhow." He went to the end of the tunnel and picked up the bit of bedstead and began to attack the wall of chalk. It was not as easy as he had expected. The chalk in the inside of the hill here was firm, not crumbly as it was on the outside where the rain got at it. Barney's bashes with the awkward piece of metal only broke off smallish chips of chalk, and he was soon puffed. Stig, who had been standing watching him, took the digger from his hands and showed him how to dig out a hollow at the bottom of the chalk wall. Then knocked down large chunks, which came away easily because they were not held underneath. There was soon a pile of loose chalk, and Barney picked it up with his hands and put it in the small tin bath. When it was full, it was about as much as he could do to drag it along the floor of the cave towards the entrance. Stig helped him, and between them they lugged the load out of the den and dumped it. But Barney noticed that Stig took care to put it some way from his door. He supposed that piles of new white chalk would let people know that something was going on. Stig let him dig next time, and he soon got the hang of cutting under and letting it tumble down from the top. Now and then they would come to a great flint embedded in the chalk, like a fossil monster with knobs and bulges, and they would have to chip round it, worry it, and loosen it like a tooth until at last it came free, usually bringing down a lot of chalk with it. They worked on happily for quite a time, taking it in turns to dig and load, and now and then they would stop for a break and take a drink of water from the tin or eat a refreshing apple. Barney's jeans were white with chalk dust, and his hair and nails were full of it. He suddenly wondered what his grandmother would say. Then he suddenly wondered what time it was, in spite of the apples his tummy was telling him that it might be lunchtime. "You haven't got a clothes brush, have you, Stig?" he asked. Stig looked blankly at Barney, decided that he probably hadn't. And Barney decided that he probably hadn't. His eye fell on Stig's water pipe. Somebody had thrown away a vacuum cleaner, so there must be one of the brush things somewhere. Sure enough, he spied one, fixed to a sort of T-piece on the end of a long, thin pole that was helping to hold the roof up. He thought the roof might hold itself up for a bit while he got the worst of the chalk dust off the vacuum cleaner. I'm not reading very well today, am I? Let's try that sentence again. He thought the roof might hold itself up for a bit while he got the worst of the chalk dust off with the vacuum cleaner end, and it did. Stig was watching with a very puzzled look on his face, wondering why Barney should be pulling down part of his roof to brush at his clothes with. "You're lucky, Stig," said Barney. "Nobody asks you how you got in such a mess. I've got to go now. Must be nearly lunchtime. Pity I can't ask you to lunch, but really," he thought, "nobody else even believes in him yet." "I'll be back this afternoon," Barney said from the door. "Thanks for letting me help. Goodbye." Grandmother and Lou were late getting back from the town, so he had time to get the chalk out of his nails and hair and to look fairly respectable for lunch. They were too full of talk about how they had spent their morning to question him much about how he had spent his and what he had been doing. Over the stewed apples, he was able to say quietly, "Granny, have you got any things you don't want?" "Things I don't want, dear?" Grandmother repeated. "What sort of things? Chilblains? Grandchildren?" "No, Granny, I mean things like windows and chimneys." Grandmother thought about this for a moment and then said that really she couldn't think of anything like windows and chimneys except windows and chimneys, and she thought the house had only just enough of these to go round. And Lou just laughed and said, "Really, Barney?" Then Grandmother said that it did remind her there were some tins and jam jars she had meant to put out for the dustbin man, and perhaps Barney would be a dear and carry them to the gate. Tins and jam jars. What will Barney do with them? There were more jam jars than Barney had thought possible, and quite a lot of useful tins, the sort with lids. Barney looked at them. The dustbin man wouldn't say thank you for them, he thought. Why shouldn't Stig have them? He remembered a big wooden box that Grandfather had helped him fix wheels onto, so that he and Lou could use it as a cart. He searched round and found it among the firewood, but still with its 4 wheels, more or less straight, and a piece of rope on the front to pull it with. He loaded it with jam jars and tins and found it quite a weight when he set off across the paddock with it. He looked at Flash, the pony, as he struggled through a clump of long grass and called rather crossly, "You might come and help pull instead of standing there." But he knew that Flash took a lot of persuading to be caught for Lou to ride him, let alone for pulling carts. The pony just stood and watched, tossing his head now and then at the afternoon flies. By the time Barney had got his load to the edge of the pit, he was quite tired. But there was still the problem of getting them to the bottom. He sat on the camel's neck tree trunk. The string was still there. It was a thick brown sort, and he thought it would be strong enough for a few jam jars. He called to Stig, and after a time Stig came out backwards like a badger with its bedding, dragging a load of chalk. "I've got some things for you, Stig," Barney called. He pulled up the string and took the end of the pile of jam jars. About 8 of them were packed in a cardboard box. It would take too long to pass them down one by one, so he tied the string around the box, took it carefully along the tree trunk and started to lower it. This wasn't nearly as easy as the carrots. The box swung wildly. The string round it started slipping. The part he was holding tried to run through his fingers and burned his hands. He took a turn round the stump of a branch He took a turn. Oh, and let it run out through that. He took the string and took it round the stump of a branch, and he let it run out through that so it didn't hurt his hands so much. He hoped Stig wouldn't get a jam jar on his head. The box was hanging by one corner when it reached the ground, but instead of untying it, Stig disappeared into his den. "Hey, Stig! Undo it!" Barney called. "There's some more to come." Stig came out again, holding what was left of a large, broad-brimmed lady's straw hat with ribbons to tie it under the chin. He untied the string from the box and tied it to the ribbons. It made quite a useful-looking cargo sling. "Jolly good idea, Stig," Barney shouted. Stig's got brains, he thought. After that, it was quite easy. He hauled up the hat, filled it with jam jars, lowered it down with the string running round the stump of the branch, waited for Stig to unload, hauled it up again, and so on. When he had finished the jam jars, he started on the tins, which were much lighter. And when he had lowered all the tins, he looked at the truck. How strong is string, he wondered. Could he send the truck down the same way? If he didn't, he would have to trundle it all the way round the top and along the bottom of the pit. He wound the string a few times around the branch stump, leaving enough loose to reach the trunk on the cliff top. Humped himself along the tree trunk, tied the string to a wheel of the truck. Ooh, is that wheel going to stay on? Oh, to the wheel of the truck, moved back along the trunk and pulled the truck towards him by the string. The truck lurched over the edge of the cliff, swung wildly outwards on the string, then ran out so fast that he couldn't stop it. He just could not stop it until a tangle in the string made it stop with a jerk. The string broke and the truck was falling through the air. I hope Stig's not underneath it. Barney held on for dear life to the tree with his face against the mossy bark and his eyes shut. He felt weak and dizzy. At last he allowed himself to look down. He couldn't see the truck at first. Then he saw that it had swung out to land on the branch of an elder tree and was hanging there quite happily. "I've sent the truck down," he called to Stig. "It may come in useful." He was still feeling that his grandmother used to call hot and cold all over, but he carefully inched himself off the tree and onto firm ground and set off round and down to the pit, probably still feeling a bit shaky. A pity he couldn't let himself down on a rope, but no, he thought he wouldn't try just yet. His idea of sending things down on the string had been a good one, though, he thought to himself as he walked through the copse. Another day he'd have to find some more tins and jam jars to send down. He hoped Stig liked them. They would come in useful well, things like that always come in useful if you kept them long enough. By the time he got to the den, Stig had untangled the truck from the tree, and was squatting, looking at it and at the tins and jam jars. And then Barney wondered what they were going to do with them. "These are jam jars, Stig," he explained. "Jam and marmalade come in them, and you can use them for keeping stuff in them, rice and coffee and things like that." But did Stig want to keep rice and coffee in his den? "And these are tins. They're empty, of course, but you get all sorts of things in tins. Peaches and baked beans. You have to open them with an opener like this." And he took out of his pocket a tin opener, which he usually carried about with him. It was the sort with a butterfly handle. Oh, it wasn't one of those. It was one of those, with a butterfly handle that you had to turn. Just to show, he fitted it to the bottom of one of the empty tins and twisted the handle. The opener crept around the edge of the tin, the blade ploughed into the metal at the bottom, and soon the shiny round disc of metal came loose. Stig was fascinated. He looked at the flat round piece of tin that had come from the bottom. He looked at the empty tube, which was all that was left of the rest of it. And he took the tin opener from Barney and turned the handle, but he couldn't make it out. "Oh, it's quite easy, Stig, look." And Barney took another tin, fitted the opener on the bottom and showed him how to work it. And there was another round plate and another tin tube. Then Stig had to have a go, and they started on a third. One of the tins had been rather flattened, but it gave Barney an idea for how it might be used. He took it, left Stig with the others, and towed the truck into the den along to the place where Stig had been digging at the chalk. There was quite a lot of loose rubble lying about there, and Barney set to work shoveling it into the truck with the flattened tin. It was certainly better than using his hands, though it wasn't quite the right sort of shovel shape yet. He hammered at it with an unbroken flintstone and made it into more like quite a handy scoop, like the sort the village grocer used for shoveling sugar into little paper bags, and maybe sweeties. Sometimes they shovel sweeties into paper bags with stuff like that. He toiled away until the truck was heaped full. It held much more chalk than the tin bath, and because of its wheels, he could pull it away quite easily. "Look, Stig," he said as he went past where Stig was sitting. "Look at all the chalk I've loaded." But Stig seemed too busy to notice. Barney wheeled the truck along to the place where they were now dumping the chalk and tipped out his load. Then he ran back to the den with the truck bouncing along empty behind him. When he got back, Stig was sitting there surrounded by round plates of tin and empty tubes, and just in the act of taking the bottom out of the last tin. "Stig! What are you doing?" exclaimed Barney. "You spoiled all the tins now. You can't keep things in tins with no bottoms." He was really quite annoyed. What was the use of a lot of tin tubes with no ends? I can think of something. Can you think of something? Something that was mentioned earlier. Stig sat there playing with them. He seemed to have the idea of fitting one inside the other, but that wouldn't work because they were all exactly the same size. However, one of them that had got a bit pinched did fit into another, which seemed to please him a lot. Barney thought it was a bit childish of Stig to sit there playing like a baby with plastic bricks when there was all that work to be done. But Stig went on seriously worrying over the problem of fitting them together. He found that by pinching together the ends of the tin, he could make it fit into the next one, and soon he had 4 or 5 fitted together like a length of stovepipe. Stovepipe! Barney knew there was something Stig needed badly. "You are clever, Stig," he said. "You've made a chimney." I thought he might, did you? Stig looked blank. He didn't know he needed a chimney. He didn't know what a chimney was. Certainly he'd made one, but if it hadn't been for Barney, he wouldn't have known. Working together, they fitted all the tins one into the other until they had a pipe that was taller than either of them. With Barney directing, they carried it into the smoky den, where it was too long to stand up straight. There they are, building their stack of tins in the smoky den. "Now, all we've got to do is poke it through the roof," said Barney. Stig looked doubtfully at him, but together they managed quite easily to push it through a crack between the piece of linoleum and a sheet of corrugated iron. But now what? They couldn't just leave it hanging over the fire. "I know!" Barney exclaimed. "The bath!" He left Stig patiently holding the chimney and went and fetched the tin bath. What luck! It had a rusty hole in the bottom, which only needed a little bit of work with the boot scraper to make it big enough to fit the chimney through. Stig was dimly beginning to see what Barney was trying to do. Together they built up a fireplace of chalk blocks and big flints, rested the bath upside down on top, and there was a mantelpiece and chimney with the flue leading from the hole in the upturned bath through the roof and into the open air. Barney lit the fire, which Stig had laid as they built the fireplace, and threw some additional scraps of paper and twigs onto it. Once the smoke had learnt its way, it went roaring up the pipe. They rushed outside, and there it was, coming out of what looked like a proper chimney pot sticking through the roof. Stig watched fascinated. "There you are, Stig," said Barney. "Now you've got a proper fireplace. People can come and visit you without getting their eyes full of smoke." Actually, Stig didn't seem to care very much about having the place full of smoke, but he was as pleased with his fireplace as if it was a new toy, and he kept putting twigs and leaves on the fire so that he could go out and see the smoke coming out the other end, and Barney was so proud of his invention that he looked round for something else to invent. He saw the stack of jam jars. What had he bought those for? It would be too dull just to fill them with food. Stig's den wasn't that sort of place. He had to think of a new way of using the jam jars. I don't know what he's going to do. Do you? Not sure. What had he thought Stig's house needed most? Can you remember what he thought it needed? A chimney. He'd got that now. A chimney and, yes, a window. A window! Well, windows were made of glass and so were jam jars. Yes, but the shape's wrong. Doors were made of wood and so were clothes pegs. Ships were made of steel and so were tin openers. But you can't make a ship out of a tin opener and a door out of a clothes peg. The shape's wrong. You couldn't hammer glass flat, could you? He picked up the boot scraper. No, of course not. Stig had stacked the jars on top of each other, lying on their sides. They made a sort of wall of glass like that, but they rolled about, and of course there were gaps between the jars. Barney looked at one side of the den, the darkest side, which really needed windows. It was built of wooden boxes from the dump, bottoms outward, open tops inward. He took the digging tool and knocked the bottom out of one. There was now an open square where the daylight came in, but so did the wind, and Stig didn't seem at all pleased at sitting in a draught. Stig's like to be snug, thought Barney. He carried the jars in and stacked them in the frame in the box. They fitted quite well. The light came in, but the draught came in too. Stig got up and looked at the gaps between the jars, grunted and went out of the den. Barney followed him, wondering. Stig led the way along the bottom of the cliff to where there had lately been a landslide, and quite a large chunk of cliff top had come down in one piece. Between the topsoil and the chalk there was a layer of red clay. Good, damp, squidgy stuff you could make model animals with. Stig began to dig out lumps of clay with his fingers, and Barney found another good clay mine and did the same. They got as much as they could carry and took it back to the den, and from the outside Stig set to work to fill in the gaps between the jam jars. They had to make 2 more journeys before all the jars were firmly bedded in clay, and then Barney carefully wiped the smears off the bottoms of the jam jars with a rag. Then they stood and admired their window. They even made faces at each other, one standing inside, the other standing outside, because you could almost see through it. It certainly let the light in, even though it were late in the afternoon and there was not much light to let in. Well, well, said Barney, that's that. It was a thing he had often heard grandfather say when he'd finished a job. He was tired after all the inventing he had done. He went to sit down, and then he saw all the round plates of tin that Stig had cut out lying around on the floor. He gathered them up. There must be a use for these too. He went back to the window and found that the discs fitted exactly over the ends of the jars. If he pressed them into the soft clay, there were just enough to go round. There you are, Stig, he said, like a ship to shut the portholes, like on a ship to shut the portholes, if you don't want people to look in or to shut the dark out. There was a feeling in the evening air that darkness was coming, and that it would be snug to sit by the new fireplace and watch the fire go up the chimney. But Barney suddenly remembered something and stood up with his mouth open. Stig, he said, I've got to go home. All the way home, I mean. I probably won't be staying with Granny till Christmas. Stig looked at him. Stig, said Barney, when I come back again, you will still be here, won't you? Stig didn't answer. But he went to a little niche in the chalk wall, poked about among some things there, and brought back something which he gave to Barney. He looked at it. It was a little chipped flint, perfectly shaped like a flat Christmas tree, and very sharp. An arrowhead, Barney gasped. For me? Oh, thank you, Stig. I really must go now. See you at Christmas. You will be here at Christmas, won't you, Stig? Goodbye. And he ran off. As he made his way along the bottom of the pit, he felt he knew the way there better than anywhere else in the world, and he felt that Stig's house was as much his home as anywhere else. After all, it was like drawing pictures. Once you've put a chimney and a window on a house, you've really made it a house. That was good, wasn't it? I wonder if he'll still be there at Christmas. So the chapter 3 is It Warms You Twice. And I'll read that soon. That was a long chapter. I hope it's going to upload all right for you all, and I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you could draw some pictures of what it looks like, what that house looks like, what Stig's house looks like. Now it's got the chimney and the bath mantle and the jar window. I'd love to see your pictures if you can. I'll see you again soon. Love you lots. Bye.